Okay, let's begin with the analysis of the quantitative ability section of 2022 EOM CAT 6. So there are 5 broad areas that we will be looking at. We will be looking at the topic distribution, question mapping in terms of difficulty level, the number of expected attempts, expected score, and the percentile score mapping. So let us begin with topic distribution. So in this paper, we had 3 questions on numbers, 2 questions on time, speed, distance, 2 on percentage, 1 on heights and distance, 1 on circles, 1 on quadrilaterals and polygons, 2 on ratio proportion variation, then 1 each on logarithm, progressions, set theory, surds and indices, inequality, and linear equations. And finally, we had 4 miscellaneous questions. So we can see that we had questions from a wide variety of sources. So this was a well-diversified paper. Now, let us look at the question mapping in terms of difficulty level. We will begin with the easy questions. So the first easy question asked us to find the number of statements that were correct. So there were a few statements provided. We had to find out how many statements were correct based on the information, and the information was with respect to set theory. So it was a question on set theory. We had families, some of them have a phone, some of them have a car. Various information was provided. We had to see what we could understand from that. And through that information, we had to see which of the statements were correct. How many statements were correct? Very easy question. We just required knowledge of the fundamental concepts of set theory. We could have easily solved. This should have been attempted. Then we had a question in which we had 3 circles which were touching, and the centers of those circles were forming a triangle. We had the sides of the triangle given to us. We had to find the radius of the circles. So taking the radius of the 3 circles to be A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, we could form equations and we could solve those equations to find the radius. Now, the next question was a question on indices. So 2 to the power x is equal to 8 to the power y plus 1. 9 to the power y is equal to 3 to the power x plus x minus 9. Very easy question. Using just the basic properties of indices, we could have seen that we were getting 2 linear equations here, which we could have easily solved to find the values of x and y. And then we could have found the value of x plus y. Now, next we had that dd to the power e is equal to d double e d. And we had to find the values of d and e. Now here, number familiarity would have been helpful. And in fact, the value that we are talking about here in this question, that is a value that you should be deeply familiar with, because it is a value that we use very often in simple interest, compound interest, even in the lectures. So the value is 11 cube. 11 cube is 1331. We have used that many times in simple interest, compound interest questions, compound interest. So this was something that if you had thought about it calmly for half a minute, 1 minute, it should have struck your mind. So DD, that can be 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, or you could have tried these values also. So the first value that you would have tried, 11, you could have seen that 11 to the power 3, that is giving us a 4-digit number, which is satisfying the format. Next, we had a very basic question on logarithm. Just the fundamentals of logarithm were required, and we could have easily solved in 30 seconds or 1 minute, but we could have easily solved it, and we should definitely have attempted this. Next, we had a question on direct variation, in which we had to find the maximum number of passengers that the boat could carry. Now, this was a standard question that we should have solved before, because this is a question that has come in the CAT many years before. And it is a standard question that we teach in class also. So this was definitely an easy question, because we should have come across this question, this type of question by now. Even if we hadn't, it was not really a difficult question. The basic relationship of variation that was already there in the question. We just had to use a little bit of logic and we could easily arrive at the answer. Next, we had a question on averages. So we had to find the number of students in the class. And we had the average marks of the class in different situations. So we could easily form 2 equations based on the information provided and solve them to find the answer. Next, we had to find the greatest prime factor of 2 to the power 100 minus 2 to the power 96. So we could simply take 2 to the power 96 common, and we would get 2 to the power 4 minus 1 inside the bracket. And from here, 2 to the power 4 minus 1, 16 minus 1, that is 15. So we could easily see that the greatest prime number, that would be 5, because 15 is 3 into 5. So greatest prime factor of this expression, that would have been 5. Now, next we had a question on inequalities. Very basic question, just required the basic concepts. So using those basic concepts, we could have easily found out the range, and we could have solved this easily in 1 minute. Next, we had a question on heights and distance. So we had 3 vertical poles of different heights that were given to us. They were standing in a straight row. Now we had the distance between the tops of A and B and the tops of A and C. So using the heights and the difference in the heights and the distance between the tops, we could find out the horizontal distances. And therefore, we could find out the distance between the feet of B and C. Standard basic question, should definitely have been attempted. Maybe the calculation would have taken you a bit of time, but in 2 minutes, you could have easily solved this. So continuing with the easy questions, we had a question in which we had a decagon, which has 10 sides. So that figure was given, decagon was sides were meeting at right angles. We had to find the perimeter. So this was a very logical question. Just through observation, without even putting pen to paper, we could have solved this. Now, next we had a question in which in a football league, a team was playing 60 games. Team never lost 3 games consecutively, never won 5 games consecutively. We had to find the range of games that the team could have won in that season. So never losing 3 games consecutively. So maximum 2 games consecutively, the team could lose. So out of every 3 games, team could lose maximum of 2 games. So we could find the maximum number of games that the team could lose in 60 games. Similarly, never won 5 games consecutively. So maximum team could win 4 games consecutively, and so lose the 5th game. So out of every 5 games, minimum the team had to lose 1 game. So we could find the minimum number out of 60 games, and we could easily find the range. Next, we had a question in which we had a table with various data. So it was more like a data interpretation question, but there was only one question. And this was a very easy question because we had all the data. We just had to perform the calculations according to the information and the question provided. Next, we had a standard question in which about ages, a word problem on ages. So 2 people, one person is saying, today I am 5 by 3 times your age. Other person is saying, today I am thrice as old as I was when you were as old as I am today. So second part might have been a little confusing, but these types of questions have been discussed in class. So you should have known the method, the approach to this question. And even if you were confused for the initial part, 20-30 seconds, after that, your practice, your learning in the lectures, that should have come into play and you should have been able to solve this. Next, we had a question on time, speed, and distance. Person is covering 2/3 of a distance, bike has a breakdown, and he's pushing the bike, covering the remaining distance on foot. Time of travel on foot was 18 times time of travel by bike. So just by using the fundamental concepts of time, speed, and distance, we could have solved this using ratios, using equations, whatever worked here. We could have, it might have taken some time because these breakdown questions, people tend to get a bit confused, but all of these concepts, these have been taught. So if you had done your part and practiced further after the lectures and revised whatever was taught, you should have been able to solve this. Next, we had a question on profit and loss. Very basic question. Information was provided. We just had to perform the calculations using the fundamental formula. Now we come to the moderate questions. We had 3 moderate questions. Now the first question, we had a question on time, speed, distance. So circular track, 3 people are starting from the same point n in the same direction. Speeds are n, n+1 and n+2 meter per second. N is a natural number. How many times will they meet before they meet for the first time at point capital N, which is the starting point? So I'm sure many people would have skipped this question, which is fine, but you should think about the alternative methods of solving this. One good method would be to assume values for small letter n. So n, n+1, n+2, you could take them to be 3, 4, 5. And similarly, you could assume the perimeter of the track, the total length of the track, to be the LCM of 3, 4, 5. And in that way, you could solve. So not very difficult if you had assumed some values. Next, we had a question in which we had mod of x square minus 1 divided by x minus 2 is equal to x. So we had to take different cases. Mod of x square minus 1, that can be equal to x square minus 1, or it can be equal to minus of x square minus 1. So using those two cases, we could have found the possible value of x. Next, we had a question on progression, a special case which we have learned in class, standard questions. So 3 by 7 into 11 plus 3 by 11 into 15 and so on. So first we could take 3 common from all of them. Then we could see that in each of the denominators, the difference between the values is 4. So we should multiply and divide with 4. Okay, so the 4 that we divide, that would be outside the bracket, and the 4 would that we multiply would be multiplied with each of the terms. Then we could break them up. So 4 by 7 into 11 would become 1 by 7 minus 1 by 11, and so on. And then we could cancel off the terms. Only the first term and last term would remain. And in this manner, we could solve. This is a question that we should have solved before, should have learned and should have revised and practiced on our own. So we should have been able to solve in the exam. Next, we had 3 difficult questions. First difficult question was that if the first 8,000 natural numbers, which are neither perfect squares nor perfect cubes, are written, what will be the last written number? Now, this was difficult because first of all, we had to find what are the total number of perfect squares and cubes in the first 8,000 natural numbers, and which numbers are perfect squares as well as perfect cubes. So adjusting for that, we could find, okay, these are the natural numbers remaining, which are neither perfect squares nor perfect cubes out of the first 8,000. So now, in order to get total of 8,000 such numbers, we had to look at the next 105 numbers after 8,000. And there 8,100 was a perfect square, so we had to eliminate that. So keeping all of this in mind, finding the total values which are perfect squares or cubes, and those values which are both, and adjusting for that, then extending the numbers, that would have been difficult. It would have at least taken some time. So this was a question that should have been left for the end. At the end, if you had time, you could have attempted this question. If you had the time, you could have thought about it calmly and found all the relevant values. Now, next we had a question in which a person was starting with 64 rupees, making 6 bets, winning 3 times, losing 3 times. Wins and losses occurring in random order. Chance for a win equal to the chance for a loss. And each wager was for half the money remaining at the time of the bet. Now, this was a question many of you might not have come across before. So that is why it is a difficult question at this stage. Now, in this question, we had to understand that it does not matter in which order the wins and losses occur, because every time there is a win, whatever money is there will be multiplied with 1.5, because we will get 0.5 times more money that we had, because we are winning the bet. Every time we are losing, our money will be reduced by half, because we are losing half the money. So we will multiply with 0.5. So we would multiply with 1.5 3 times because we are winning 3 times. We would multiply with 0.5 3 times because we are losing 3 times. So we can see that in whatever order the wins and losses occurred, we would still be multiplying with the same values, the same number of times. So final value would be the same in any condition. Now, next we had that from a group of 7 people, 7 committees are formed. Any 2 committees have exactly 1 member in common. Each person is in exactly 3 committees. Which of the following statements is true? We had various statements. Now here, it would have taken some time to figure out that we need to have 3 people in each committee. Then we would have had to list down the committees according to the conditions. So it would have been confusing, would have taken time. So this was also a question that could have been left for the end if we had the time at the end after tackling the easy and moderate questions. So now, let us look at the expected attempts and the expected score. So we can see that in this paper, there were 16 easy questions, out of which 14 at least should have been attempted. Ideally, all the 16 should have been attempted because they were the easier questions. And in competitive exams, we target the easy questions first because all the questions carry equal marks. So ideally, all the 16 should have been attempted. But in case you could not attempt 1 or 2, at least 14 should have been attempted. Then we had 3 moderate questions, out of which 1 could have been attempted. The one on the special series, maybe. Then we had 3 difficult questions which could have been skipped. So out of total 22 questions, we should have attempted at least 15. And out of these 15 that we attempted, even if we had got 2 incorrect, so even if we had got 13 correct, we would have landed up with a score of 37, which is the expected score. 13 correct, so 39 minus 2 because we had 2 incorrect. So 37 should have been the expected score for the average well prepared student. So now let us look at the percentile score mapping. So a score of 18 would have fetched you 80 percentile, 25 would have fetched 90 percentile, 21, 95 percentile, 37, 98 percentile, 46, 99 percentile, and 58, 100 percentile. So not at all a difficult paper. As long as you had targeted easy questions, remained calm, you would have done well in this paper. With this, we conclude the analysis of the QA section.
Hi, so let's start with the exam analysis of the 2022 EOM CAT 6 DILR section. Now, over here, we are going to look at the question mapping, which were easy, which were moderate, which were difficult, expected attempts, expected scores. Okay. Now, there were total 20 questions in this DILR section. Out of that 20 questions, 4 sets of 4 questions each were there. This was the first set. So this was a data set having talked about different Grand Slams of tennis, Australian Open, French Open, and Wimbledon. And we were told data about these 5 tennis players: Agassi, Andy, Pete, Stephen, and Ivan. We have been given different data over here, and according to that, we have to form a table. Now, depending on the given information, we are able to find out the various possible cases. And depending on the different questions, then we are able to answer the questions. Now, this was quite an easy set as compared to the other sets in this exam. So this was doable. Okay, let's see the next set. This was the most time consuming set, and every question had to be done separately. So there was a lot of calculation involved in this set, mathematical calculation, and understanding the question was also a bit tricky. So therefore, you could have skipped this complete set as well, okay, because it was time consuming. So these 4 questions you could have skipped completely. Next was the set of arranging the visits across various cities and of the various peoples whose designations are given. Okay, so 6 people of a UK based company. These are the designations and their fields. Okay, they were visiting sites in various cities. So if you read this question basically becomes a question like a Sudoku. So if you are good at Sudoku, this question would be quite easy for you. It would be a bit time consuming, but still it would be doable. So these were 4 questions. Now, from the data, you are able to fill up almost all the schedule from Monday to Friday for all the cities of all these 6 people. And depending on the questions, you have to find out the answers. It was quite doable, quite easy. Once you are given data for specific questions, you are able to solve that particular question quite easily. It was just like fill in the blanks. So this was quite doable. The next one of the easiest sets. So again, we have 4 questions on this thing. This here, as the data is given, you have to draw Venn diagrams. So it is given here. A total of 4 perfectly circular security areas, straits are defined in the waters. So it is just Venn diagrams, and you have to mark these things and answer the 4 questions. Pretty sure that it was the easiest one amongst the four sets. This one and the first set were the easiest. The second was the most difficult set of the oil refineries. Third set was a bit time consuming but doable. Okay. And after this, we had data sufficiency questions. Okay. All four data sufficiency questions were simple if you knew the topics, because this was, you can see, it is based on the concept of circles. If you know the properties of circles, very easy question. Over here, properties of numbers. If you know the concept, very easy to do it. This was a logical question, quite easy to do it as well. And this one, again, it was play of words. If you understand the concept over here, it was quite easy. Okay. So the last eight questions were quite easy. So all eight of them, you should have done it. Okay. So now let's understand this thing. The last eight questions were very easy. You should have attempted all of them. Now, difficult question. Now, amongst the set of the oil refineries, one was very difficult. So that's why I've counted that over here. Okay. That was not doable at all. Now, amongst the remaining 11 questions, that is set 1, then set 2, and set 3. Set 2, you can skip completely. Okay. Now, from set 1 and set 3, combined, you will be able to solve around 5 questions due to time constraints. Okay. So, total attempts, you should be able to do 13 questions out of 20. Out of 13, 12 must be correct. So 12 threes are 36. One is wrong. So your good score will be around 35. That will be a good score in this paper. Okay. So that's it for the analysis of DILR section of 2022 EOM CAT 6.
Well, then, we are here with another analysis, EOM CAT 6, a paper that was, as I always say, I need to give you a summary of the paper. So, yeah, EOM CAT 6 was a paper that was clearly a bit biased. Biased because it was a paper that required attempts in question types which some of you have not been taught. And if you are not been taught those question types and if you attempt them, you are likely to see a dip in your scores. So yes, this was more towards those who are in the advanced stage of BARC preparation than towards those who are in the intermediate stage. Beginner stage, like I keep saying, till you finish RCs, all the lectures, you do not have to worry about your analysis. You just have to worry about your test taking strategy. So that's what we will do. Throughout the test today, we'll cover up the different question types. Like I said, an unfair one for those not yet at advanced stage. Otherwise, we modified the structure again. We went back to 24 questions in 40 minutes. Reading comprehension, 16 questions, 4 passages with 4 questions each. And we gave you a surprise. We gave you a surprise because this time there were no summary questions. This time there were 3 logical continuation questions. 2 out of context, 3 parajumbles. That makes it a total of 8 verbal logic questions. Overall difficulty level, I'll call it moderate. I wanted to call it easy to moderate because you will realize towards the end of the analysis that the target, the expectations were pretty high compared to a moderate paper. But then there is some math here. I'll tell you the math when I reach the end. So let's get started with the question specific analysis. First passage, an economics passage on Piketty and the rise of inequality. Easy to moderate overall. Why? Because it was easy to read. The questions were moderate. The first question was an assumption question. If you understood the assumption, if you did not understand the assumption, you are probably searching for the answer in the passage, which is why if you confused this assumption question with an inference question, this would appear to be fairly difficult to you. Otherwise, it was a moderate question. Second mentioned in the passage, sort of direct, but no, allegedly 3 answer choices. I can't call it an easy question. It was a moderate question. The easy question was the next one, the inference question. And lastly, you had one question, applied information, that was really, really difficult. There were twisted choices and applied information. I think by the time you reach mid-September, these questions will start looking easier. Till then, let's keep them into the moderate or difficult section only because you need more practice. Second passage, a dream. The easiest across this test was passage number 2. Easy to read, easy to moderate questions. 4 questions, out of which there was only one difficult question, and even that one question was difficult only in a relative sense, because the other 3 were so easy, this seemed difficult, otherwise this was not so difficult. So two mentioned in the passage questions, both of them very, very easy. Yeah, the 7th one was a bit of a trap because the sentences, the answer choices were too long, but otherwise it was fairly easy. 5th was a sitter. 8th, not so tough. You still probably, if you found it tough or if you made a mistake in question number 8, it just means your fundamentals of approach to inference questions are still not in place. Like I said, logical purpose, not so tough, but then compared to the others, maybe it was a bit difficult. My third passage was again an economics passage, a passage on unemployment in India, a mixed connotation throughout the passage, talks positive, negative, negative, positive, ends up with the national education policy. Doable, definitely. If you had to do 2 passages in this, you will have to do 2 passages. You will have to do more than 2 passages in this test to get a decent score. So third passage is one of the, it would rank second in your sequence, if not first, in terms of the approach to the verbal section. So overall difficulty, moderate to read, only because the passage just jumps from one to the other topic and it becomes a bit difficult to maintain your focus in such a long passage. Mixed bag questions. Why? Because there was one easy and one moderate, and there were 2 difficult questions. Again, there were 2 applied information questions. One very easy, the other fairly difficult. The inference was not so much difficult. The gist question, it was a bit of a trap. It was a reading trap, basically, because the sentences were so long, you don't really expect those such long sentences, and then you had to understand it was like a summary question. That's what you want to avoid. It was like a standalone summary question. The difference between a summary question and this question is, this required you to summarize something that is longer than the typical paragraph in a summary question. So yeah, that's what I said, mixed bag questions. My last passage was a philosophy passage. And for the third passage, I said, if there is one passage that you have to do in this test, it is passage number 3. If there is one passage that you definitely want to leave out in this test, it is passage number 4. It's a very enticing passage. You start with television, and by the time you reach the explanations of Russell, you are completely lost. The placement of the passage also matters. It was 4th in the sequence. If by any chance you were too fascinated with the idea of doing passages, by the time you reach this passage, you would have felt slightly exhausted, which makes this even more a passage that you should not have attempted, or if you did attempt, you should have attempted only 1 or 2 questions. Televisions, face-to-face conversations, philosophy, oh, I'm so numb. I mean, I added the 4th word. The first 3 are there in the passage. Moderate to read, majorly difficult questions, I'll call it difficult. 2 inferences, none of them, no easy questions. The only passage where there were absolutely no easy questions. All the questions were either moderate or difficult. In fact, except question number 13, everything was difficult. The answer choices were vaguely worded. You go from 13 to 14, you realize how answer choices become even more vaguely worded. And then there was a 15, again, a summary passage, a sort of a question, twisted rephrases. And there was an applied information where apparently either all of them can be related or none of them can be related. Then you had the surprise of this test series. For the first time in this test series, you've seen logical continuation. We've taught logical continuation in verbal logic. For those who have not been taught logical continuation, this was just not worth attempting unless by any chance you were taught logical continuation in RCs. Some of us do that. Some of us, some verbal faculties will do that. But anyways, so 3 questions. The first, equalizer in modern warfare, difficult. Why? Because the passage was so easy. It was ridiculously easy to read, which is why you get stuck. You get stuck because there are at least 2 answer choices which seem correct. And you keep bouncing between those 2. But if you read too carefully, you'll actually start bouncing between 3. And that's not good. That is just not good in a question type where you have negative marking. The next was food and history. The passage was weird. I mean, reading the passage, not being able to pronounce the words never makes it easy. So the passage was weird to read. I haven't said easy, but then easy only if you can skip the words in the passage. But still a close call between options 2 and 3. So if you did not get distracted by the language of the passage, this was an easy one. This was a ridiculously easy one. I don't think that is possible because 1, there was a surprise factor, and 2, people still don't have that habit of discounting proper nouns. So because of those 2 problems, this one qualifies as a moderate rather than an easy passage. Medieval defensive strategy, on the other hand, was easy. There was nothing to confuse. If you still made mistakes in this one, I would say either you have not been taught logical continuation or you haven't understood logical continuation. Next on my list, parajumbles. Oh, the copium critic parajumble. Read and read and link and read and come back and change the link. That's what this passage, this parajumble was all about. Difficult. I could have easily qualified this as very difficult. You understand the passage and you understand what the passage is, but then what goes where? Explanation. Why can't 2 come after 4? Look at the length of that explanation. That tells you why this parajumble would be either difficulty level 3 or 4. And the next 2, very easy, extremely easy. So what was this? This was again a chance, not a chance, a challenge to selection. You read copy and critic. Seems easy. You want to give it time. Hold yourself. Ask yourself, do you want to give this time? Do you want to look at the other 2 and then decide whether you want to give copy and critic a time? Just because there is no negative marking, there is still time that you invest in a parajumble question. So if you've invested time into this question and you've gotten it wrong, even if there was no negative marking, you wasted time. Because the 21st and the 22nd were way too easy compared to the 20th when it came to finding links. In fact, 21st, the first 2 links are the first 2 sentences to be linked are really, really easy. It is just about the last 2. And the 22nd it's probably a textbook question. It is as simple as the kind of questions that you see in the books. Last was my out of context. 2 questions, one very, very easy, the other not so difficult. Yeah, if you got attracted by the idea of Statue of Liberty and New York, then I can't say anything. But otherwise, compared to the other 6 questions in verbal logic, these 2 were easy. If you had, you just have to, if you have been taught out of context, you have to get both of them correct. There's no way you can say I got 1 correct and 1 incorrect. So that was the question specific analysis for the 24 questions, which brings me to what were my overall targets. 6 easy questions, 8 moderate questions, 10 difficult questions. Balanced out, easy and moderate comprises 14 questions, difficult comprises 10 questions. That's why the overall paper still stands at moderate, not moderate to difficult. And how should you have taken the paper? All 6 correct in easy, 7 out of 8 correct in moderate, and 3 out of 6 correct in difficult. That's what you should have done. And if you have interchanged the attempts between moderate and difficult, I'm pretty sure you're sitting with a score that is 8, 10, 12, or 15 lower than your actual potential in the VRC section. This would lead me to 20 attempts, 16 correct. Yes, 16 into 3, 48. Minus 4, 44. That was the good score in this test. What should you have done? Started with passage number 2. 6 minutes, very easy to get 4 out of 4 correct, 6 to 7 minutes. Go to passage number 1, not so much of a problem, 4 attempts, 4 correct. Yes, 4 attempts, 4 correct is very possible. Or passage number 3, depends on you. Either it has to be passage number 1 or passage number 3, but you have to replicate the 6 to 7 minutes, 4 out of 4 correct, which now means whichever you take first. If you take passage 3 first, then for the next passage, passage number 1, the target becomes 6 to 7 minutes and 4 attempts, 3 correct. If you take passage number 1 first, then you go with 6 to 7 correct, 6 to 7 minutes, 4 attempts and 4 correct in the passage number 1. And then 6 to 7 minutes, 4 attempts, 3 correct for passage number 3. Whatever suits you. Passage 4 now gets parked. It goes to the end. I said there is some math involved here. This is where I'll show you the math. Parajumbles. 2 attempts, 2 correct, definitely doable. Now is where you also see why I introduced this test by saying it is biased in favor of those who are at their advanced level, because the target is 20 attempts and 16 correct. If you pay attention to the verbal logic part, parajumbles, out of context and logical continuation, 7 attempts and 4 correct come from that part. Which means if you are not good with these 3, if you have not been taught, let me change my sentence. If you've not been taught these 3, there is no way you can reach 20 attempts and 16 correct. So the paper is out of reach. The math here is, I said my good score is 44. You do not always have to get me 20 attempts to get me a score of 44. 44 can also be 15-1. But how can it be 15-1? 15-1 is a ridiculously high level of expected accuracy. No, I am saying attempt 20, but out of instead of getting me 16 correct, had you gotten me 15 correct, 1, and you still had 4 or 5 incorrect, but out of those 4 or 5 incorrect, if you had gotten me only 1 incorrect from the negative marking questions, everything else was in the non-negative marking questions, which basically is 5 questions, parajumbles and out of context. If everything else went incorrect in those questions, even with a 15-5, you can score 44. And that probably saves you the effort of getting into passage number 4, where I have been extremely frugal. I've given you nearly 5 to 6 minutes, and all I am asking you to do is get me 2 attempts and 1 correct. So if you want to do that, great. But that is how it works out. You've seen in the past, I have said that at times the verbal VRC section is 36 to 38 minutes, 37 to 38 minutes, 38 to 40 minutes. This test, no, it is not possible to finish it in less than 40 minutes. I mean, rarely, very, very, very rarely. Which is also, I've seen the scores of EOM 6, and I am not surprised that most people have not been able to cross a 98 or a 99 percentile in verbal. That's what the paper was. So this is what it was: 20, 16, good score 44. That is one way of getting it. As I said, 16 correct, 4 incorrect, or you could have gotten 15 and 4, 5, whatever suits you. 64 would be my 100 percentile, from 29 to 64. Same old story, double the score, your percentile goes from 80 to 100, and same old numbers. You go from 64, from 99 to 100 percentile, there's a difference of 12, 4 extra correct. Now you know why people did not reach 100 percentile, and only probably 1 odd person would have reached a 99 percentile. Everybody would be hovering between 95. Not everybody, all the toppers would be hovering between 95 and 98, because that was just doable. So 98 to 99, 8 marks. That means 2 less incorrect, 2 more correct. But then 95 to 98, the same old pain, 1 extra correct. One question that you answered incorrectly, had you answered it correctly, you would have gone from a 95 percentile to a 98 percentile. Nearly the same calculation for 90 to 95, but then from 80 to 90, you needed 2 extra correct. That is how it works. That was the VARC analysis for you. Now I come to the overall analysis. It is becoming a bit weird that VARC is still becoming the seemingly the easiest section, because in almost in every test, VARC has been the section that has the highest scores for each percentile. We'll do something. We'll probably come up with test where VARC is not the easiest, or it doesn't look the easiest. But in this test, that's what it is. If you have paid attention, you must have realized that for the last few mocks, the 100 percentile overall has been in the range of 140s. It is either 142, 143, 144, or 146. It hasn't fallen below 140 because that is what the number was for CAT 2021. So we are balancing the paper such that you eventually reach the numbers or the targets or the scores that actually existed in CAT 2021. 100 percentile, next on my list is a 99.5 percentile, the difference 22 marks, which would be 7 questions. Oh, okay, that's a lot. So 7 extra correct moves you from 99.5 to 100, but then from 99 to 99.5, just a difference of 11. The same pattern repeats everywhere. In each of those sections, it is always a matter of 1 or 2 correct. Play around. 1 extra correct here, 1 extra correct here, 1 extra correct here. 3 extra correct, you move from 99 to 99.5. Or 3 correct, and another 1 correct. 3 correct. 9 extra correct, and all you need to do is you go from 106 to 111 overall percentiles. So this is the reason, if you understand this is the reason a lot of people will find it easier to jump from 98 to 99 percentile. But if the sectional cutoffs are 99 percentile, you will probably be much higher if you jump in terms of overall score. Sectional cutoffs become a pain. That is where people will have an overall score that is much higher than 99, but because one of the section gets missed out, you miss out on a call. You won't miss out on a call, you have a lot of time. So that's what your overall score predictions would be for EOM CAT 6, CAT 7, CAT 8 analysis should be out soon. In the meanwhile, keep preparing, stay focused. You have one-to-ones coming up, you have strategy sessions coming up. We hope you'll find time to fill up your CAT and NMAT forms soon. If you've been given targets according to your one-to-ones, please make sure that you find time to talk to your mentors if you're not able to achieve your targets, or if you think that you are lagging behind the targets. That should be it. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great preparation time ahead. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.